Welcome to another episode of Inappropriate Growth. Today we have an exceptional guest, Barry LaBov. Barry is a two-time Entrepreneur of the Year and future founder of a renowned marketing firm with impressive clientele, including Macallan Scotch, Harley-Davidson, Audi, and numerous B2B brands. He has an upcoming book entitled The Power of Differentiation: Win Hearts, Minds, and Market Share. It's distributed by Simon & Schuster. Now, Barry's mission is to inspire over 1 million people worldwide with the message that leaders must discover what makes their company unique and distinct, and then celebrate it with their employees before launching it to the world. Join us as Barry shares his invaluable insights and stories to provide us with some valuable information. This will be a great episode. Let's get inappropriate. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4 of the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. I'm very excited today to have Mr. Barry LaBov. Am I pronouncing that right?
You got it perfect, Paul.
Awesome. I'm on a roll with that. All right. Well, Barry, so to keep me from having to do it, why don't you tell our listeners, where are you and how did you get there?
Well, I am in the beautiful city of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I run a marketing, communication, and training company. I've run it for about 40 plus years. We have clients all over the nation and to an extent all over the world. We focus on one word, and that's the word differentiation. We help our clients differentiate their brand and their products so that they stand out in the market, and even better, we help them celebrate that uniqueness with their employees so they rally their people behind their brand. And ultimately, what that really means is their customers feel it. Their customers love their brand. So I wrote a book about it. It's called The Power of Differentiation. The subtitle is what I just said: Win Hearts, Minds, and Market Share. So that's me in a nutshell.
I did my homework. I know that you are a two-time Entrepreneur of the Year. And I'm curious about your journey. What are some of the key moments that shaped your career?
Well, I was a rock and roll musician. So I played music since the time I was 12 years old. I had a band that had a song on MTV, VH1 videos. It was recommended for the Billboard charts and all that. At the same time, I was running a jingle company, the irritating little ditties that you hear on radio and TV. And then tragedy struck in my life, and the tragedy was my father passed away. And I was maybe 28 years old or so at the time. And it really dawned on me that, you know what, maybe I don't have all the time in the world. Maybe I can't just, have my feet in two sides of the camp here. Maybe I have to commit and decide to do one thing, not a couple. So I gave up the band and focused on my business. Now, what happened, Paul, was within 2 years, one of the companies I had done some music or audio work for called me up and said, "Hey, we want you to take over our marketing department. We want you to buy it from us, and then we'll give you 3 years of guaranteed business with us, and you'll become our ad agency." And being the great entrepreneur I was, I said, "No, I don't think so. I think I'm an audio guy and all that." So they went, "Okay." I gave them the name of a local agency to talk to, and then maybe a half dozen other production companies, and said, "Hey, I hope this helps." Well, they called me back 2 or 3 times, the same thing. And then finally one day the phone rang and my receptionist said, "Hey, it's the client on the phone." I went, "Oh my gosh, when do they stop pestering me?" And he said, "Barry, I want you to become our agency. We'll give you all our business for 3 years, please." And I said, "I've given you all these other names and I've tried to help you find someone else. Why do you keep coming back?" And he said, "Because we trust you." And I went, "Ooh," and it really hit me. So here's what happened. I said, "Okay." I took on their business and became a full service marketing and advertising company. Didn't occur to me, Paul, that that meant all of my clients, which were my jingle company clients, which happened to be agencies, all looked at me as a competitor and they all dropped me. So all of a sudden, I lost my other clients, but I gained my one big client. Within 1 year, I was chosen as Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst and Young, in part by some of the work I was doing with that client. Now, since then, we've grown. We work with Harley Davidson, with Macallan Scotch, with Audi, Volkswagen, little companies, big companies, and it's been a blast. So I love it. But I did not think I was going to love it, but I did, and it's turned out wonderfully.
Well, okay, but you mentioned, McAllen, Harley Davidson, Audi. There's some big
Hmm.
companies a lot of people know. We know how you got your first main company. How do you secure high profile clients?
I looked at it like this from the very beginning. I did not want to be just a local this or that, or, the nice little such and such company down the street. I didn't want to do it. I thought, why should I have such low expectations of myself? Number one. Number two, Fort Wayne, Indiana is beautiful and wonderful. But when I started the company, the country was in a recession and Fort Wayne, Indiana was in a depression. There was nothing going on there. So it kind of tattooed me, tattooed on my heart that I need to go look for companies all over the nation because there are a lot more of them than the ones in my local market. So I did that. It also forced me to raise my standards. I couldn't just be good enough. I had to be really good. It also meant all of a sudden I'm competing against the best of the best. So, you got to be pretty good. You got to be actually not just pretty good. You got to be real good and you have to be on top of your game. So, it it made me better doing it. So, yes, I'll work with local clients, but I'll get some of these big ones and they're great to work with.
I'm sure we skipped over what was probably a transition that full of existential crises that happened going from the jingle company to the full blown marketing agency.
Mhm.
Aside from the recession, what do you think were the biggest challenges you faced in the early days?
Well, my biggest challenge was growth, in that for me to grow, I had to learn how to sell. And I was a terrible salesperson. So I had to find people who would help train me to do that. Then what happened, Paul, once I learned how to sell, and it is a time consuming thing to do, I had the challenge of saying, now, wait a minute, I can create what I'm, being paid to do by my client, or I can go out and try to sell and get more clients. It's hard to do them both. And so, as I brought people in, the big challenge for me was to not let go of quality or control so much, but let go of the inspiration that I had and somehow hope that somebody else would be as inspired as me, somebody that would be as excited as me. And that was a tough thing because that's hard to find.
You're describing something for entrepreneurs that I run into a lot, especially when people leave the safe confines of a job and go hang a shingle or start their own business. They might not have the right amount of zeal to jump into a proper marketing plan or campaign because heaven forbid it works. We're all going to
Yes.
die because we can't scale, or there's nothing. We're not ready for this. And being an entrepreneur, you have to take your baby or your creation or your gift or your talent, and it's just a business after that. I mean, convincing people to hire people, I don't know, smarter, more talented, better looking, taller, went to a better school, richer, whatever, instead of trying to hire somebody that knows nothing so you can feel superior and teach them everything they know.
Yeah.
If you're scaling a business, unless that business is teaching people how to be employees, it's always best to hire outside of, hire people that you're comfortable trusting and delegating to. And that's
Yeah.
you're describing that challenge that I see over and over again. But people will
Yeah.
start to describe it, and just to not be rude, when I'm coaching them, because they're my client, I have to let them explain it. But I know 5 words into their story, I know exactly what the problem is.
Well, here's something, and maybe you've run into it too. And I love what you're talking about here. I think it's a great conversation. You know, what I've run into with my business over 40 years, so it's been a long time, is I at sometimes would bring in somebody with a great pedigree and they had really done it elsewhere, but they were such a bad fit for my culture
Right.
internally that it was like, oh my gosh. And my culture is a pretty hands-on culture. So I actually work. I actually do things, where there are companies where they're very much siloed, I don't do this or that. That person does this. I don't tell them what to do. They don't tell. So one thing that I've had a big challenge with is the culture of my company. And this sounds really great and wonderful, but it is not for everybody. Is very collaborative.
Right.
Meaning, if you and I were working together, Paul, and we're working on something, I'd say, "Hey, Paul, have you thought about doing that?" And you might go, "Why are you telling me that? I mean, I thought I was supposed to do that." Or you would be saying to me, "Hey, Barry, what do you think? Why don't we try this too? Is there any reason we can't?" Okay, our company is doing that all day long. So sometimes I've brought people in, and they were great people. It was just not a good fit. But I brought them in, and they're going, I don't want to I don't want to do this. I want to be the face of the company to the client. I don't want anyone else involved. I want it to be me. And we're going, but that's not how we are. So that's another challenge we have, which is you can bring in talent, but if they're not the right fit, they may do well elsewhere, but in your company, it could be a disaster. So I think that's another challenge.
You said a key word there, culture. People are not culture fits, but if you have no awareness of your culture, or you're just oblivious to it, you think it's one thing and it's actually something else. People aren't working out and you can't figure out why. This headhunter found this perfect fit and they were a perfect fit. You like the same baseball team, everything's great. And then it doesn't work out and you can't figure out why. It's because you either weren't aware of your culture, you didn't prioritize it, or you weren't honest about it or informed.
Yeah.
But the culture is, yeah, you can train people, slows down your growth and scalability if you're training, but there's a balance somewhere. And awareness of the culture can save you a lot more time. It's not a waste of time to be aware of what the culture is, because a lot of times when I'm having culture conversations, and you probably have seen this, but it's like I want to talk to the owner and ask the owner what the culture is, and then I want to go talk to everybody that works there and ask them what they think the culture is, and then I kind of treat it like I don't know, a family law custody judge, where you're going to hear his truth and her truth, and then you got to figure out what the real, where, and then
Right.
get everybody on board with what the actual is and what's the delta between where it is and where we want it to get. And then when the culture's figured out, then decisions like hiring and growth and expansion are way easier, because there's a culture litmus test. And once you have that,
Yeah.
you do it much quicker. So I think you're on the you learned that quicker than most. And I say that like you learned
Yeah.
it quick. 40 years later, you know it, but there are people
Yeah.
that have gone longer and not learned it.
We got to look at our culture or how we do what we do, similar to our brand as an example. We should not try to be all things to all people and think every customer, every client should love us and we should please every client. We shouldn't be. We should be just right for the right kind of client, as an example. Same thing for employees. I think what helped me was there was a point where I realized, we're not going to be perfect for every person that comes in. And it's not up to me to sell them on why we're going to be perfect. And I don't want to try to scare people, but at the same time, I want to be open with them and say, look, here are a couple of things that describe what it's like to work here. And you may or may not like that. And, not to go into too much depth on this, but we have a very diverse clientele. So that sounds great again, right? But it's not for everybody. And I remember clearly talking to one candidate, and I said, now we have a very diverse clientele. So it's in a lot of different industries, different countries. I don't know how you feel on that. And she said, well, I can put up with that. You know, I love automotive primarily, but I can put up with it. I said, that's the point. I don't want to be that boss that's forcing you to do things that you can put up with. I want to be the person where I say, hey, you're working here and you're going, I love all the variety. I love it. And she said, well, I honestly just want to work in automotive. And I said, okay, let's not work together. And I think we have to understand as entrepreneurs, we're not only not perfect for clients everywhere, we're not perfect for employees or prospective employees that come in.
Can you think, and I'm talking specifics now, can you think of a particular memorable success story? We're working with your clients, and this could be somebody high profile or not. A memorable success story, like something that was dramatic, or you may have changed someone's situation for the better, that even exceeded your expectation.
Great question. I haven't thought of it like that. I think quite often we work with a client, and if anything, we underestimate what we've been able to do to help them. And so we've worked with clients where uh, what we did, they told me, was the highlight of their career. So that's pretty big. And so I would say it has happened a lot where it has exceeded it, in part because, again, it's a culture thing for us. We're there to serve the client, and we don't brag about our clients. We don't brag about being great or being funny or anything like that. We're pretty focused on the challenge, and that is having our client and their brand look like the hero. So I think we've helped clients many times. We helped one iconic company launch its very first electric product, first EV. We've helped clients launch their very first learning university online, and it had never been done before by them. So we've done a lot of those things. So I'd say it's happened a lot. We just, if anything, we kind of downplay it.
Changing gears a little bit, I want to talk about the power of differentiation. I can learn to say the word. What's the key message you hope readers will take away from that book? And what inspired you to
Well,
write it?
that's a great question too. I want to inspire over 1 million people with the message in the book. Doesn't mean I want to sell 1 million copies. I'm not thinking about that. But there are plenty of people out there, plenty of leaders who could benefit from understanding that you need to discover, not try to create. You need to discover what makes you unique. Big difference. Because if you try to create what your brand is, it's hard to live up to that because you're trying to be things because someone else is trying to be that. So you need to do it. Instead, you learn the 1, 2, 3, or 4 main differentiators you have, and you have to be able to communicate them and name them. So those of us who have children, we don't name them child 1, 2, and 3. They actually have names, right? So we have to name what our differentiation is. And then what happens after that, and this is part of that message, is don't just launch it to the world. Celebrate it first to the people who are servicing or building the thing or selling what you're doing, whatever. Celebrate with them. And here's why we do it. And it's really important, Paul. People need to feel a sense of significance. They need to feel that what they're doing is meaningful. Okay. And they need to feel that where they work is doing something of value as opposed to just making money for the guy in the corner office. So in celebrating and sharing what makes you unique and different as a company or as a brand, we have to also let individuals know the role that they play is so important. In some cases, they may be playing a role that indirectly saves lives or certainly can protect lives. In some cases, they're playing a role to help people enjoy their life in situations where they couldn't even do it. Some of it's incredibly meaningful. So my message is you discover what makes you unique, you turn it into a celebration, And then eventually, yes, you're going to increase your market share and sales and do well. But that's what it's all about for me. You asked what inspired it. Originally, it was a book primarily on marketing and branding based on 50 stories I knew after all these years of being in business of really great companies that had done some historic things. When COVID hit, and in 1 year, 50 million Americans quit their jobs, it occurred to me that, you know what, maybe this book could also help people want to stay at their jobs. So if we can help not only identify what makes a company unique so they can sell more, but also help them hold on to employees and give a richer life to those employees, I thought, wow, that's great. That's what inspired it.
Talk to business owners. I say all these things we did because I find out their goals and their purpose and their why, and then I get real specific. You take goals and make them smart or whatever, but I go through all that and challenge them on those goals and say, what's the time period? Because they have a tendency to overestimate what they can do this year, but underestimate, the next decade. I then tell them, I then ask them, do you know what your employees' goals are? And they might say yes, but it's not a strong yes. Like they're not,
Right.
they
That's a
really
great
they
question.
haven't done it because I just exposed them to a goal setting exercise that might be superior to anything they've ever done. It was really deep. It's the foundation of what I do. But I tell them, if you can teach your employees that your business, that you have ownership in your company, so you clearly see your business as a conduit to get what you want, or to
Right.
do what you want, be who you want to be, or to go where you want to go. You see it the way it's going to happen. It's going to happen because of this business. So you probably don't walk in your front door of your office and step over a beer bottle that was left there by some pedestrian the night before. You're going to pick it
Right.
up because there's pride and ownership of a business, and you'll probably get frustrated watching other employees step over it
Sure.
because that's not their job, and there was just an aggravation for them. But when something magic happens, when people see their employer take an interest in their personal goals, that level of ownership kind of rises. But what you just said was pretty good. I like it. About, let's connect with the purpose of what we're doing too. So the boss is showing interest that maybe no previous boss has ever shown, and I'm seeing so I'm having ownership in this company. That dovetails nice into, this company is doing good in the world, or this company is making this happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. So I'm really, I have a strong connection to that. I like that a lot.
I think one thing on that that I could add is, you know, if I get the idea of understanding what an employee's goals are, and I think it's really important. And I don't know every goal of every employee of ours. I know many goals, but if we think that in many cases the employee's goal is, look, I want to work, 40-ish hours a week, and I'd like to be in a really nice environment, and I'd like to not have to travel, and I'd like to not have to work on weekends and extra hours, then one thing I think we can also agree on is what you just said, and that is, then let's let them know how important what they are doing is. You know, that's a big part, because somebody down the street will say, oh, you can work half days on Fridays. Or somebody down the street will say, I'll give you whatever you're making, I'll give you 1,000 more. But the person down the street might not be smart enough to say, hey, you know what? You come down to my place and you're going to make a difference in the lives of people, and you're going to be celebrated every day. So if you can do that at your company, you're in better shape. And it's a daily thing. I mean, it's not, you don't wait till the company picnic or the holiday party to let people know. It's every day you do it. So that's why it's not easy to do.
Okay, well, it sounds like it sounds like a tenet of, I guess, your leadership style or what you've learned. But how, or what are the most important lessons you've earned with regard to leadership? Throughout your career, because you've done different types of things. What are the biggest lessons you've learned there to get you where you are today?
I think to me, some of the things I've learned that are valuable, we've talked about employees. I think when I have had high levels of turnover, it's because I rushed into hiring and hired a person who was a good person, but just not the right fit, figuring we can overcome that. We'll make it work. And I've never seen it work one time. So to me, I'd rather go without an employee being, position being filled than fill it with a warm body and then lots of excitement that will make it work. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing I've learned is to not compromise. It's very easy to compromise. It's very easy to want to scale, which means you lower quality or attention elsewhere. So to me, one of the things I've learned, and I struggle with all the time, is I don't want to compromise. I want to make sure what I'm doing is inspiring. I want to make sure what I'm doing is, I can't say my best because that's all an opinion, but I want to make sure what I'm doing is potentially something that is very, very meaningful to people. So I think it's important to constantly strive for that. I think another thing is to share success. So my company shares success. Every single employee, no matter how long they've worked for me or what their pay rate is, shares the exact bonus every quarter based on how we're doing. And they all know where we're at and they all see the numbers. And it's not a profit number that can be manipulated, it's a factual number. And we share that. And it gives me a platform to say, hey, if we can land this new client or we can get blah, blah, blah done, we'll make even more. And we doesn't mean me, it means all of us. And we all get the same bonus amount. So I think sharing in the success is great. And I say the final thing is what we kind of started out with, which is have your sights raised high. Don't lower your sights. Don't try to be the best local such and such. Be good enough that somebody will seek you out from somewhere else. I mean, if you're good enough, like for me, if my company's good enough that a company in Scotland is working with us and a company, in New York City is working with us, or one in Los Angeles is, then we're probably good enough to work locally as well, but it doesn't work the other way around. So I think have have your sights up there a little bit. Don't lower your sights. Raise those sights.
Speaking of future goals, what are your future goals, aspirations? And I'm talking personally and professionally.
My future goals are I want to inspire 1 million people with the message of my book. So I want to keep track of it. I am already keeping track of how far we are on that goal. So that's a big goal to me because you inspire 1 million people, you make a difference. So that's a big deal for me. I'm an old guy, so what will happen with me is I will be dedicated as long as God allows me to be creative, work on new ideas, help people take on challenges that clients, small or large, want to share with me and do that. So no retirement plans. I play golf, but I don't play good enough golf that I could stand to play every day of the week. So I couldn't stand my performance level. I could stand playing, but I can't stand where my performance level is. So for me, I have to keep doing something creative. That's what I have to do.
Any specific initiatives or projects you have lined up?
I may have a sequel to my book that I have already started sketching. So I have that. That's one option there. My company has two young people that are going to go through ownership of it. So they'll be taking over the majority of that in the next 3 years or so. So that's happening. But I will be able to do what I do best during those times too. So that's that's what I'm doing. I like where I'm at. I think what I'm doing is meaningful. So from a professional basis, that's what I'm doing. And it connects with my personal life too, with my family. So that's what I'm doing.
Any advice you give to young or aspiring leaders and entrepreneurs who are looking to make a significant impact in their industry?
I think stop worrying about scaling and start focusing on each one of these projects one at a time that you're doing and making sure you think they're great. It always scares me when somebody wants to scale, but it's only because they want to make more money and do less work. And I think that if you really want to do something great, sometimes it's work, and it's okay. Um, so I think that's important. And I talk to young entrepreneurs all the time. I think the other thing I would say is watch out for your ego. You know, if you think you're great and you think you're the greatest thing, you're not learning. So I think you have to constantly learn, constantly figure out where you need to grow, constantly humble yourself to say, hey, I need help on this. So to me, if you want to grow and you want to grow fast, instead of thinking of scaling, humble yourself and realize where you're weak and go, hey, Paul, how can you help me on this? Or what am I doing here? Or how could I do such and such better? So I think those are the things I would say.
All right. Well, let's say someone's watching or listening to this podcast and they want to know how to get in touch with you. They want to work with your company. They want to work with you. They want to read your book. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
There are several different ways, and I welcome any of them. Obviously, on LinkedIn, uh, just say, hey, I heard you talking to Paul. I loved it. Let's talk. But I think going to my website, labov.com, or my personal site, barrylabov.com, check out what's there. There's some free downloads. You don't have to even leave your email. You have a chance. You can set up a Calendly meeting with me as well. And I'm happy to talk to anybody, happy to give input. If it's not a transaction, I'm fine with it. But I love connecting with people. I think it's an opportunity to help, and it's an opportunity to learn for both sides.
Love that. That's great. All right. Well, Barry, this has been great. Learned a whole bunch of stuff. Love your backdrop.
I love your backdrop too. I think they're just two peas in a pod. I love it, Paul.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your conversation. And to all our listeners, if you're going to grow, no, you're probably going to have to do something inappropriate.